Welcome back to another episode of DF Retro Extra, where we look back at conferences from E3 and beyond. This time, though, it's finally the moment of truth, the day of reckoning, if you will. This is the Xbox One reveal. And of course, as always, I am joined by my two wonderful colleagues, Richard Leadbetter.
Thank you, John. I'm not sure I should be thanking you, but here we go.
And of course, on the other side, we have Alex Battaglia.
Oh, I cannot wait to see this. I just saw Shavat Yearly, by the way. That's amazing.
Well, see, now you're excited. So, where do we start here, guys? I mean, this conference it's an important one for what happened in the industry, but it's also sort of a masterclass in how not to reveal a console.
It's totally awful. I don't know where to begin with this. I've reviewed the content prior to this conversation. I'm speechless. I just am awestruck at how bad it is. The thing that really, I think we should put this into context. This was like 2 weeks before E3, where they were going to apparently show a big bunch of games, but we've got basically an hour here of nothing, and this, what we're seeing now, is really does sum it up. You know, there's no content here whatsoever, absolutely nothing of consequence whatsoever. As an intro to a console, I don't know where to begin.
So I think the best place to begin is to sort of set the stage here for what things were like at this time period. So the Kinect had been released 2 or 3 years prior. It was a reasonable success. Motion control was considered like a big thing. So there's that. But on the other side, there was also this massive push towards mobile gaming. Everybody thought that mobile gaming, Facebook gaming, social gaming, all this stuff was basically a threat to the console industry. There was questions over whether consoles would even remain relevant. And to me, this whole thing feels like a combination of one, like Microsoft bringing in like the Office people and the Microsoft Corporation as a whole to tackle this problem in the sense of, okay, well, maybe video games on consoles are not the big thing anymore. So how do we get to that wider audience? How do we make our own Wii and go beyond? They just missed the mark.
Yeah, I think they also looked at the growth of the streaming market during this time and the fact that people were sitting in front of their TVs not just to watch movies from like Blu-rays or DVDs anymore, but it was, you know, using as like an all-purpose device in front of the TV, like with smart TV. I think they looked in that direction then instead of looking for just mobile games almost.
That's the funny thing, though. You said the magic word. You said smart TV, and Richard mentioned this to me earlier, and it's true. Everything shown here can be done on a smart TV now, which is basically every TV. And the interfaces on these TVs today, especially, and even, you know, some years in the past, is so far beyond what you could do on the Xbox One here that it just makes the whole thing look redundant and silly. Like, this was not the place to focus it.
I mean, especially the cost of this when it comes out. I mean, you're paying a steep price for that Kinect unit and the box when you're already paying for a TV, which might have these features to a certain degree anyway.
I still think that a lot of this is telemetry driven. Microsoft knows exactly what you're doing on your Xbox 360 if it's connected to Xbox Live, so they would have seen that there would have been a huge amount of hours being poured into Netflix as opposed to gaming, and they're thinking, well, what are people doing with their consoles? Is it the end of the console as we know it? Do we need to evolve? Do we need to do something different? Hey, we've got all of this information coming back telling us, first of all, that people are watching a hell of a lot of Netflix on their machines. And secondly, you talked about Kinect being reasonably successful. It was actually, I think it was like the biggest consumer electronics success point when it actually launched. But I think the issue is that the timing was just incredibly bad for Xbox One here, because as you say, smart TVs was starting to become a thing. You didn't really need to have that level of integration. And, you know, literally a couple of years later, a smart TV would be just so much better than the interface you got with Xbox One. And, well, you know, what can you say about that? And secondly, Kinect. I think even by the time the 360 was winding down, everybody was aware of its limitations, that the the developers had stopped having much of an interest in it. So that, you know, this just goes to show how long it takes to develop a console. Decisions that are made years prior come back to haunt you if they're not the right decisions. So Kinect was just the wrong product at this point. And I think it's a bit of a shame. I mean, we're going to see the interface coming up here. And it is, what's remarkable about it is that the level of engineering that's gone into something that's ultimately not needed. It's an astonishing technical achievement, but it's just not what we want or what we need.
Exactly. But coming up here, though, Don Matrick is about to reveal the one system, as he keeps saying over and over again, leading up to the reveal of Xbox One.
Ladies and gentlemen,
here it is.
Introducing Xbox One.
Yeah. And this is the other thing.
Still a name.
You know, the box. It's just, it looks like a set-top box, and I suspect that's entirely by design.
Yeah. It's amazing how their design evolved. So, like, there's still this like rectangular box, but the Xbox One S and X are just these beautiful, sleek-looking machines that feel really dense. And this thing is this gigantic, hollow, ugly, plasticky-looking box. It fell flat.
Instantly responds to you. I don't like even claims like that though. I don't think that's what I would characterize Kinect as.
No, no, not at all. Now that though, the controller. Now this was actually a great piece of engineering and design work, I'd say. As I mean, fundamentally, they're still using this design as the basis for the Xbox Series X and everything going forward. It's a really good controller.
Definitely, yeah. So that is one of the few successes, I think. The box itself, I mean, they were kind of... one thing we have to credit them with is the fact that it was a very quiet machine, and that persisted into all of their other Xboxes. Microsoft knew that we needed a quiet machine in the living room as opposed to what we got with PS4, which was significantly louder. But the price we're paying for it here, in terms of the form factor, is remarkable. And one thing that is really sort of catching my eye straight away is how shiny the plastics are. I remember when I got my review unit, within the day there were fine line scratches already on that unit, even though I barely touched it.
The plastic quality's terrible on top. It shows every scratch, every piece of dust. And I feel like that's a mistake they should have seen coming, in the sense that Sony made that same error with the original PS3 as well. That piano black finish that was slightly transparent, it doesn't look good after a very short period of time, versus the Slim, which was totally fine. Here we go, Yusuf Mehdi.
So we just had Matrick, who's kind of not revered in the same way as Phil Spencer is. I think his sort of leadership of Xbox is not looked back fondly upon.
No.
And I kind of think we're about to see why, when we see that there's a focus here not on the Xbox One as a games machine, but as some kind of weird living room omniscient guardian.
I mean, it's the all-in-one experience.
I'm thinking back on the Xbox 360 generation. Xbox had some pretty big exclusive games. You have Gears of War. You've got, I guess, the original Mass Effect there. You've got Halo. You know, a number of games that, you know, drove the generation. But this conference, along with talking about, you know, TV and all these other things, is talking about multi-platform games primarily. And I think the only exclusive game that is mentioned is Remedy's Control, but in a way that obviously isn't really talking about the game. It's weird that they moved away from talking about exclusives to only really multi-platforms.
I feel like they probably felt they didn't need it.
You missed Forza. There was a Forza reveal.
Forza, yeah, that's true. Good one.
So there's the original Dash, which I guess similar in concept to what it is now, but it has evolved significantly from that.
Similar aesthetic, though. I still think that this is an area where Sony really are ahead of the game, in that the interface feels a genuinely pleasant place to be. And especially when you think back to PlayStation 3, you know, in many ways that system was under-spec'd compared to Xbox 360, graphics in particular. But you booted up that machine, you had that beautiful 1080p front end, and it actually just felt like a really high-end, pristine experience. And we got a hint of that in the PS5 reveal, and it kind of irks me a bit that the evidence is suggesting that Xbox Series X is going to retain this aesthetic, which is kind of functional, but doesn't in any way sort of invite or welcome you into the system.
Yeah, and there's also the concern that it's still going to be 1080p,
Right.
which, like, to me, it seems absurd that such a high-end machine would be straddled with this user interface that you'll spend plenty of time looking at, only to have it be kind of blurry, fuzzy, and not that visually attractive at all. Like, I think they're really underestimating the importance of having a really nice, beautiful, sharp front end. There's the TV. This is when it starts. It's showing the multitasking.
It begins.
Looking at the UI design, though, this is like coming together with Windows 8 design around this time period, with the tile interface, which is really interesting because that was also hated. But then it's brought obviously onto the Xbox, where the tile interface was developed because of touchscreen experiences, more or less.
Yeah.
And so if you're a desktop user, it didn't have much utility to you. For here, you're using Kinect, which is even less direct than a mouse, and yet it still has the tile interface. It seems like a bad design.
Well, if I recall, maybe I seem to remember when you would enable Kinect mode, like the tile width or something might change. I actually can't remember. It's been so long, but I could have sworn it switched to a slightly more friendly mode. Or maybe I'm thinking about just like the Surface Book or something, or the Surface laptops where it has the touch mode, but I feel like something changes when you switch to Kinect mode, because none of that stuff is really part of the Xbox experience now. Like, a lot of the stuff being shown here has either been stripped out or pushed to the back.
Well, there's no Kinect anymore, which...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, well, what can you say here? I mean, this presentation, it looks a bit dodgy to me. Because first of all, I'm not sure I would trust that particular stage setup for doing a live demonstration for Kinect.
Not at all.
Secondly, the way he's jumping between stuff there, I mean, I'm going to go and jump to a game now. Well, he's not jumping to a game, he's jumping to a movie of a game.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, all of this stuff here, I don't remember this level of immediacy when I was using it.
I mean, that was the immediate thing when we got this machine. It's just... it is nowhere near as responsive as this stuff would suggest. Especially things like when you're actually using Kinect to move through the interface, like move the hand cursor around and such. Like, it's a slow, choppy experience. It's not great. And then there's this snapping stuff that was a big part of the initial launch, but it seems to be long gone.
Yes, Snap is really interesting though, because again, it's built on this conception that you want to be doing more than one thing at a time on a single screen. So here he's talking about, I'm watching the first Star Trek film, so I'm going to simultaneously watch the trailer for the second one. And then I'm going to book some tickets for it. I don't need this in my life. If I'm watching Star Trek, I'm watching Star Trek. If I want to see the sequel, then at some point I will go to the cinema, and I don't need to pre-book tickets.
This is the big mistake here, is that they got this weird assumption that people want to be doing all these things on this one TV-based machine that's a bit slow, when in reality, people just pick up their phone. Like, the second screen, the thing that you would snap is on your phone, and it's easier to just look down at the phone, do your thing directly with touch, and then look back at the TV, rather than trying to juggle these multiple slow windows and deal with the not so smooth interface around it.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing with Kinect going away, though, is you lose voice command, which could be a little bit more immediate, I guess, than the hand waving gesture stuff, which I actually think is really not responsive. And I have a distinct memory of my brother, who bought himself an Xbox One, me walking into the room and the Kinect always recognizing me as him.
Oh yeah, I remember
because we
that.
have the same stature and build and all these things. It's like, yeah, it's not very useful then, even in that aspect of making sure that there's only one user and control the device at all times. It would just like have accidental inputs, and that's not good.
think the best command is still Xbox Go Home, which is how everyone felt after this presentation. But no, it's true though. The thing about the original launch Dash is that the way it was built was that a lot of functions you might need were kind of buried deep in these in the menu hierarchy, and so for a while, like voice input from Kinect was the only way to like easily access things. Like if you wanted to use a promotional code, for instance, it was not easy to find. And I recall, it's like, well, I guess I just used the Kinect voice command to get this because I don't know where it's at. or it's because they would bury it so deep. And they've massively improved that in the current iteration, where things are at least like it's reasonably accessible.
Yeah, it's more like getting to your libraries rather quick. And,
Yeah, the library's much better now.
yeah.
You see, this split screen stuff, I mean, in the PlayStation conference, I was talking about the fact that the second screen experience doesn't work because I've only got one set of eyes. So this is kind of like the reverse, where I've got one set of eyes, but now I need two input systems to access these things simultaneously.
Yeah.
So, it just doesn't work. And, the other thing, of course, let's not forget that all of this flashy integration required, I think, 10% of the GPU allocated. So we've already got an underpowered GPU compared to the competition, and 10% of that was taken away to account for stuff like Kinect and for this interface. So, what we're seeing here is actually something that's really clever. I mean, it's, as I said, an astonishing level of engineering has gone into this, an astonishing amount of effort, but it's just not the right product. And it's fascinating to see a decision so bad realized with so much effort.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like you said, everything is kind of driven by telemetry, because Nintendo also focused on TV when they revealed Wii U. They even had that dedicated TV buttons. There must have been like enough research to suggest that, people just want to do TV at the time. And I don't quite get where all this came from exactly, like where they were sourcing this data, and like what led everyone to jump to this conclusion that, they just want to be able to watch more stuff through our machine, and why Sony was able to not fall for that somehow.
Well, I wonder on the Sony side of things whether, they actually knew what was coming with TV technology because they were making them. Whereas Microsoft would have been wouldn't have had that kind of visibility into what the TV was going to evolve into. So they decided, hey, well, we're going to take point here and do it. And, remember, this console had the HDMI input. So you could feed in a set-top box and then kind of integrate it into the whole Xbox front-end system here. Fascinating stuff. I mean, a huge investment. I think, the HDMI input's still part of the One S and the One X. Not on Series X, though, so, So
a weird trick I was using for a while, I don't need it these days because I've changed my capture setup around, is I always had issues with the OSSC being input into the Shogun Inferno because it outputs a slightly oddball, resolution and refresh rate. Well, for a while I was using the input on Xbox One X to massage that signal and then send that back out to the Shogun. So because, fundamentally, yes, it adds a lot of input latency, but if you just play on the original CRT and you just send that through for capture, then it doesn't matter and it looks totally fine. So it basically just like fixed the signal, if you will.
Yeah. So this is really interesting, primarily because we're finding so little of interest to talk about in the stream here that we're actually talking about little hacks we use to get good capture sources from dodgy HDMI sources. And I've got to admit, you're right, John, that Xbox One is brilliant for cleaning up dodgy HDMI. The pass through there.
It's good for that.
But now I think he's going to start talking. I mean, we've already started talking about the Kinect, but now we're getting a deep dive into this rather unwelcome aspect of the Xbox architecture. So we're getting the whole shooting match here about what is different about Xbox One. I mean, I guess they had to do something different because Sony had gone ahead with PS4 reveal 3 months earlier.
Yeah.
So this is a response to what Sony did, and the response was, hey, we're not going to talk about games for at least half an hour of this presentation.
Oh no! See, like 5 billion transistors. Rich was mentioning it before we started talking about how many transistors your SoC has is really irrelevant. It doesn't say anything about the performance figures. And then just saying 8 gigabytes of RAM at a point in time.
8-core CPU.
8-core, like this, no actual spec details. They want to glide over that so people don't
they know
talk
they
about
know.
Power. Yeah, they know at this point in time that they have nothing to talk about there. Obviously, it didn't, stop people from having conspiracy theories about how ESRAM, how it every like 1 million cycles or something like that could be a tiny bit faster than 8 gigabytes of GDDR5.
When did the rumors of the second GPU, specifically the one hidden in the power brick, start to appear?
The power brick one is new to me, but I was kind of in the middle of all of this at the time, and we knew the specs because of the massive hacks that were happening at the time, and we knew exactly what the specifications were. There were clock speed tweaks. But that slide that we saw earlier was kind of pseudo confirmation that everything we knew at that point was true, because it talks about the 8 gigs of RAM and the 8-core SoC. Oh, and those 5 billion transistors. Let's not forget that a big bunch of those will be sucked up by the 32 megabytes of ESRAM on the SoC. So
yeah,
but yeah, so in the context of all of that, but the dual GPU thing, I believe, started from a really early leak about the Xbox One, as it came to be, where they were talking that there would be 2 GPUs in the system, and nobody could let go of that one. So even when there was the big hack with the leak, with the full spec, basically. People were asking, well, where's the second GPU? It's we know there's a second GPU in Xbox One, so it must be they're keeping it secret. This is kind of what we're seeing now with PlayStation 5, where certain spec points haven't been revealed, and it's all to get one up over Microsoft, when the reality is probably something rather more mundane and different, and we probably know the spec as it stands right now.
Yeah.
And people, it's what I call the vacuum of information. If something isn't clarified 100%, then the vacuum has to be filled with something, and it comes from conjecture, rumors, misinterpreted comments, people talking off guard in a way perhaps they shouldn't, and being misinterpreted. And so we had a big bunch of that sort of stuff. The second GPU was one. My personal favorite, and I'm going to keep talking about it, is the dual layer ESRAM, where 32 megabytes. It's only one layer. There's a second layer, and it will give Xbox a huge advantage over the PlayStation 4. This is kind of the bizarre situation that we're in right now, where the information has been presented, but it's not enough. So people need to kind of fill in the gaps, to sort of fit the fanboy theories. I mean, we're talking about this because, again, they're talking about Kinect, and I think the thing that really stands out about this presentation is how badly it's aged, how many U-turns there were, and how irrelevant it is to today's Xbox.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, the controller there is obviously still relevant, but you're right. The Kinect stuff before, like, if you take that as its own thing, it is fascinating, I suppose. I mean, the problem with Kinect really just comes down to it's just not a great interface for playing games, and it was never going to be. It's not fun to do that. Like, holding up your arms to pretend like you're driving a car with nothing to hold on to, or, just those types of things. Like, when you press a button, that the button is like, it's a binary input, usually, unless it's analog, but you're pressing the button. But with Kinect, it's all about like sort of guessing what the game wants. So even though it's really just about translating your emotions into that kind of input, and you kind of have to guess. And some games really messed that up, where it's like you have to do a lot of specific actions, and it's very difficult to actually pull them off. Like the Steel Battalion game, I think, is a good example of that.
I forgot that it existed. Wow.
The kids loved the dancing games. That is a situation where the latency of Kinect has no relevance.
That worked okay.
Yeah.
Dance Central was fine.
So, John, do I take it here that you weren't using Rise voice commands? In Rise, Son of Rome.
Well, I've used some voice commands early on with the system for about a week.
And then you just realized how horribly boring and dumb it is, I would hope.
I kind of liked Xbox On. You could walk into the living room and just say Xbox on, and your console would fire everything up for you. I mean, it would turn on the TV and stuff, and you'd be straight in there.
Yeah, that's true.
That was kind of nice.
That's good.
But I think the other thing about the emphasis on the living room, I don't know if their telemetry can tell them whether the Xbox is actually in the living room or not, because I think a lot of people don't game in the living room. You know, kids in particular, they'll be in their bedrooms and whatnot, in which case all of this is, you know, a total non-starter.
Well, did any of you guys actually watch TV through Xbox? I never actually did.
No.
Well, the problem with doing it to begin with in 50 hertz territory is that you'd be upsampled to 60 hertz with horrible judder. So no, I didn't do it.
Oh, that's awful.
Were you in the were you in Europe when this was launching, John, or were you still in the US?
I had just moved. I moved in March 2013, so this would have aired when I was still relatively new in Europe.
Right. So I presume you weren't hooked up to the TV then via your Xbox One.
No, I mean, we did have TV downstairs in the living room, but in my gaming room, I did not have any sort of TV. So
That Xbox One's still there, isn't it? I swear it is.
oh yeah, the Durango is actually now in the living room. I mainly kept it there because
Durango. Oh gosh.
occasionally my son would like to play Roblox on there.
I'm remembering
But he usually plays on his PC now. He's turned into a PC gamer.
I'm remembering the leaks about Durango where there was a conference. I forget where, and then like one of the Crytek guys comes out. I swear I don't remember where he posted it. Maybe it was on Twitter at the time. He says like, "Just came back from the Durango conference. Really great stuff."
Yeah.
And everyone's.
I think that might have been
like,
from where the dual GPU thing leaked originally.
Oh, is it
But
really?
it wasn't a leak, obviously, if the information was at all accurate. I mean, maybe it was the dev kit or something, who knows? But yeah, I do remember that.
Something confusing.
There you
Yeah,
have it.
that's great.
The breakthrough.
So what is he doing here?
They're still talking about the
know.
system architecture and all of these things coming together. Have they done the Windows bit yet? They're talking about having the Windows OS in
The
there.
kernel?
And, yeah.
I don't think they have yet.
Oh,
Maybe they
wait,
have.
here we're going to talk a little bit about games, I guess, because they've got Andrew Wilson from EA coming up here.
Big.
And just seeing him talk, like he's still, okay, he was head of EA Sports at the time, but I swear this guy, he's immortal. He's like the same here as he is in the most recent EA play.
That's
Like
very
he's
true.
like ageless. It's amazing.
He feeds off the lifeblood of FIFA Ultimate Team purchases. He's powered by micro ATX. Micro transactions.
Once again, though, another multi-platform game. Haven't shown off any game on the system yet. Just talking.
You see, they always wheel out the Microsoft. They always wheel out the EA Sports preview of the next generation, and it never looks in any way genuine.
So
No.
mostly, like the one time they got close was when they showed off Fight Night Round 3
Yeah, that's right. That was the.
Oh yeah, good. Point.
early on, because that actually did look comparable to the final game, and the final game was absolutely stunning. Like that was just a breakthrough for visuals at the time. So big respect on that one.
However,
But not for this one. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
well, you know this.
So they said like this is Ignite.
Yeah, it's the engine, which obviously has now been mostly replaced by Frostbite, excluding
think
maybe
so, yeah.
Madden. I mean, I don't actually engage in playing any of the sports games, but the last time I played FIFA, I remember it being on Frostbite, if I recall.
Well, this is the other thing, which is how US centric this presentation is. There's a lot of US stuff here that Europeans have got zero interest in whatsoever. We get a bit of FIFA, which I guess is global. But, NBA, NFL, I can, the kind of cut through that's going to have to somebody in France, Germany, or UK is minimal. And, they're doing it again. They're wheeling out these these sports celebs.
These athletes. Yeah,
What's the point?
Well, yeah.
I know. Especially when they haven't shown anything yet. Like people are waiting. And by the way, Alex, Madden has been using Frostbite since Madden 18.
Thank you for looking that up.
So
That surprises
yeah.
me a bit, but so it is.
there was some discussion on Twitter about Madden today that kind of popped up, and It has occurred to me just the remarkably difficult, almost thankless job that the people working on Madden must have, and any of these sports games, like producing a yearly game at this fidelity that they're at now, like trying to simulate a giant field of players that all can collide with one another, all have their own unique AI, while managing the ball and all the strategies and following
strategy
rules.
on top of
it's
that too.
so complex. Like, it's insane that these games are still shipping yearly, honestly.
And are these, I don't actually know much about the development of these games. Are these like multi-studio games like the Call of Duty franchises? Or
So
is this
I'm not
like
sure
one...
about that. Like, I think there might be two kind of teams, but I suspect that it's all still kind of unified with pre-production work. I mean, they build upon what they do each year, but still, I kind of want to look more into that, actually, because it's something I've been thinking about lately, like just the complexity of developing these sports games. And how they're kind of, like, a lot of people kind of toss them aside, like, oh, it's just sports games. But really, it's kind of remarkable that they've been able to keep this up compared to the old days.
I guess we're seeing test renders here of like in-engine assets. Very low frame rate, obviously, because it's running an engine, like in an editor. Nothing really too interesting, though.
The problem here, though, is I think we'll see is that they're just not able to, outside of that one fight night thing, they really don't show what to expect yet, which maybe the games just aren't in a state to be shown at this point, so who knows, but still.
We're 31 minutes in, we've still not seen a game. We've had a flash of Forza, which wasn't gameplay, but that's it.
I think the big difference here is, so Sony took a while to get to the games as well in the PS4 reveal, but it was 2 hours, so they had more time to show games at the end, and for one, Cerny is very engaging to listen to, and then they knew that when they would get to those demos, it would be kind of mind-blowing, so they were kind of building people up, where here, you feel like you're in that same building up phase, but then it never actually hits.
Well, Sony is presenting a vision of gaming. This isn't a vision of gaming.
Yes,
it's a vision of
exactly.
some kind of fantasy living room that they're inviting you into. And it's not my living room. It wasn't at the time. It's not my living room now.
No.
And, it just goes to show what a complete misfire this is. I mean, they're still going on here. We still haven't seen any games. It's just remarkable, astonishing.
Yeah.
I was, before the Xbox One launched, I was invited to a pre-play event here that they had in Berlin back then. I can't remember, it was like maybe in September or so before it launched. And I distinctly remember almost no one playing any of the games, but just kind of like walking around and drinking because they had free drinks there. But then I walked up to the Killer Instinct booth, and I had no idea what the game was going to be like. And that game floored me. But obviously they don't show it off here.
So
Killer Instinct's great.
I got my hands on Xbox One first at Gamescom 2013.
Nice.
And I was reasonably impressed with what they had to show. It was fine. Oh, here we go. So this is hilarious because it's just another render.
Yeah.
Although, see, look, ray trace reflections already.
Back then, wow.
Back then.
There's no part of this that looks real.
You see, I understand that was actually rendered by the GPU in the power brick.
See, you're right. That's what it's for. It's the reflections GPU. The thing is, though, is you look at this trailer, and I kind of wish that this was like a single game, or you have football, the other football, basketball, and UFC all in one game. Imagine.
What? So you take your UFC character into FIFA and just beat everyone up?
Just obliterate everyone.
You see, I've been talking about this for years. Yeah, basically video game Avengers, where you take all of your franchise killers and put them into one game. And I think Ubisoft could pull it off, and it would be amazing. Assassin's Creed versus Watch Dogs.
Versus Rabbids.
And what else?
And
you gotta get Rayman? No,
Rayman, yeah. Just Dance. So,
that could be a mini game in the game.
34 minutes and we still haven't seen actual games. But
so at this point in time, he is head of Microsoft Studios, or where is he at this point?
Yeah, he's basically in charge of first party at this point. And I think he might have been living in London. I'm not entirely sure. He was definitely living in London at some point. But yeah, he's in charge of all of the first party output. And I think the challenge that they've got here is that they've left this show so late that we're just a couple of weeks out from E3. So if they're going to show their games here, what have they got for E3? So the answer seems to have been to fudge it and not really show anything. And some of the stuff we're about to see here is shocking in terms of being a non-reveal. There's no substance to it whatsoever. So let's just remember how the big event from the PlayStation event in February was that we saw Killzone Shadowfall. We sat down, we enjoyed a slice of gameplay. For a moment there, you could be transported into the living room of the future, playing the game of the future that you're going to be enjoying November of that year. That is a special moment. This is what these conferences are all about for me. But here...
Yep, I agree.
Here we're in the trailer... it's what I'm calling the trailerification of game marketing now, where you don't actually see the games anymore. In which case, what's the point?
I agree.
It is remarkable.
I've been saying this all along. It's just this trailerification of games. It really... it just doesn't feel like you're seeing anything of value yet. It's like, okay, here's a vision of what they want it to be, but you get nothing more than that.
So you get a flash of what Forza 5 is about in this, and it for the time it is a stunning game, and in the fullness of time we've become aware of the technical challenges that Turn 10 were facing in getting a 1080p 60 game out for launch, and it is a remarkable achievement. But this is probably based on game assets, but I'm not sure. Well, I highly doubt it's real time.
I think there's some comparison footage from the real game with some of the assets here, and the things like the tires along the side of the track I think are different. The crowd is no longer 3D in a lot of these shots, and I remember the ground like looking like it had a parallax look to it with the cobblestones, which is also not in the final game to my recollection. So this is just game assets. I don't actually think it's real.
And as a driving game at launch, this didn't make the same impression as PGR 3 did for 360.
No,
which just looked unbelievable. Even though in that case, the earlier trailer showed the game at 60 FPS and the final game was 30, but even still, it was amazing. Oh yeah.
See, Turn 10, I mean, maximum respect. What they do with hardware, what they do with hardware at launch, it's just pretty awesome. I think Forza 5 is
they're an amazing team.
Was probably sort of overlooked a little bit, but I think in the fullness of time, it's just evolved into a killer franchise, and obviously now we've got Horizon as well, which is just enormous. I'm really hopeful that we're going to see something from Turn 10 at the July Xbox Series X event.
They could do a lot. Wow. Yeah.
I would hope. I'd like to see something really... I mean, it's been a while since Forza 7.
It has.
And I don't just want to see Forza 8. But
I get you.
I'd like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm very curious to see what they do next, because the talent is clearly there.
They could probably pour more into the campaign areas where I would like to see them go. One thing is, doesn't that game also have Forza 5 have 2 times MSAA, if I recall, as well at 1080p?
Possibly. It could be EQAA. I'm not sure.
It could be EQ. Yeah, that's right.
Can't remember,
which would make
but
sense.
It does have a low anisotropic filtering, if I recall.
Mm-hmm.
The scourge
or just moderate,
generation.
like maybe like 4x or something like that at best.
Oh no.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
So I was getting excited for this because Quantum Break, I actually think it's a rather special game in many ways.
I like it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm a fan.
Again, it's, we've talked about trailerification. In this reveal here, we've got trailerification and TV-ification, if I could actually get the word out, where there was this huge... I mean, the thing about Quantum Break was there was some kind of big multimedia push where it was TV and gaming coming together in one glorious whole.
Yeah, right.
But
it kind of plays into the DNA of Remedy games of being kind of noir-y, filmic games, but it also... It's a big distraction from playing the game. I've played through both the Xbox One and the PC version of this game, and I watched this TV stuff in the meantime, and it's terrible. So it's just
what was that? It's like,
I don't know.
What makes you different, honey? Do you really want to know? As she touches her, and you see like a boat crashing into a bridge, like what?
I actually don't know if that has anything to do with the storyline, because in the game, this only happens to people who interacted with the time machine. Did the little girl interact with the time
I don't know.
machine?
That's what I mean. Like, where does this little girl come into play? Like, it has nothing to do with
It's
the game.
like a mind meld, but instead of sharing minds, you're sharing trailered footage from Remedy. She doesn't look too happy about it.
She's the ultimate game marketing tool.
Here's snippets of in-engine, not on Xbox One, obviously, stuff, which is interesting. I remember I swear the original reveal of the game had like 900p assets.
So the actual
Quantum Break,
gameplay
right?
reveal wouldn't occur, I think, until like Gamescom 2014, if I recall.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like, it happened significantly later than this.
Microsoft Studios is investing more than ever in studios around the world.
Obviously, that Northlight engine's really great. It's just kind of shackled to the Xbox One. It's a pretty good looking game for the fact that it is on Xbox One, that they could push so much, like that dynamic GI and all the cool lighting effects. But 720p with that native, like, early style reconstruction, it doesn't look really great these days on base Xbox.
Wait, he just said 15 exclusives with 8 brand new franchises. I kind of want to go back and do the numbers on that and see
How many came
which ones actually came to pass. Like, I don't doubt that's real, but I wonder what they are.
8 new
and if any of them
franchises.
missed.
Your games and TV come to life in ways that haven't been possible.
I don't know, though. Saying that this was... He basically suggested that Xbox One is when they had the most number of first-party games in development, and that might be true, but if you remember back to the original Xbox, there was so many Microsoft published and internally developed games.
Tons.
Although I guess that could be like kind of like contracting out to other studios.
Yeah,
But
third-party
still, they were
stuff.
first-party
Yeah.
published stuff. And there was a lot.
So this is like an entire unit that Microsoft put together to do TV?
Yeah,
Right.
something like that.
I mean, wow.
Survivor.
That innovation is about breaking the rules.
Not a lot of
and
this came to
betting on the
fruition,
power of
obviously.
invention. Today we stand
Yeah.
At least I don't remember it coming to
I kind of feel like if you go into Microsoft HQ today and you just say the word TV, people are going to flinch. Like, oof, no,
involuntarily.
don't remind me of that.
It is remarkable how things have turned around, though. If you look back to the Series S, Xbox One S, rather, and the Xbox One X, the whole DNA of Xbox had changed completely. All of this is gone.
Yeah, I would say that Phil and his team have done a remarkable job of turning the ship around because, man, it is completely different now compared to what this is.
I mean, they had some wacky ideas. There was a pre-Xbox One leak where they were talking about transmedia gaming, where, for example, they had a golf game being played out in real life, and you would be taking part in a game version simultaneously. So all of the data from the real life golfing event would be fed into the game, and then your performance would be inserted into it. I mean, it sounds like a remarkable idea, but if you think about how long an actual real-life golf game takes to play,
Oh gosh.
I mean, what are you supposed to do when they're moving from hole to hole?
Just relax.
Maybe watch trailers. I don't know.
Yes, snap some trailers of Star Trek Into Darkness there.
Yeah,
On the side.
Oh, now they're talking about Halo.
they could have like a golf
gonna be
cart
about-
mini game.
Imagine being a Halo fan at this point in time, and you played Halo 4. You liked it, maybe you didn't like it, whatever. But your first look into the next generation of Halo is a television show.
So the tough part here for them is that obviously they had just released Halo 4
Yeah.
on last generation machines, like the year before this. And it's akin to expecting Naughty Dog to turn up at a PS5 event and show their new game after just releasing it, It's like they're just not in a position to show anything new. So I'm kind of feeling like maybe they shouldn't have come out at all. It's just like,
Yeah.
we're not ready. We're not ready to show anything.
But they're about to,
But I don't know.
reveal their master plan here of getting Steven Spielberg involved in Xbox. Which,
It's about as good as Paul McCartney in Destiny,
well, he's there, Spielberg is there talking about Halo. This is a big deal, but again, when you've got a console launch, you're rolling out the head of 343, and you've got nothing to show in terms of gaming. This is just like, pretty disastrous here. Funny thing about this TV show, I mean, obviously we have reviewed the content ahead of recording this, so we've got some idea of what we're talking about. And they're talking about a Halo TV show here. The Halo TV show still hasn't happened. It's 7 years
That's
on.
right. It hasn't happened.
They're projecting 2021 for the Halo TV show. I think Amblin, Spielberg's company, is still involved. But,
Impressive.
Again, this is... Why are we even discussing this?
I agree.
I mean, there's a kind of weird thing where people like to announce their games too early, perhaps. But now we've got the announcement of a TV show that's 7 years later. We still haven't seen anything on it.
It makes you wonder how much production had even been done at this point, if any. It's crazy.
I mean,
I guess they had that Forward Unto Dawn television thing that came out before Halo 5. I don't remember if that has anything to do with this, though.
There was some transmedia elements with Halo 5, for sure.
Thank you.
The television series.
You see, look, when you look back at this, it's, there's the whole TVTVTV thing. And you wonder whether it was just selective editing or mischaracterization of the event. No, but it's not. It really is one of the most spectacular own goals.
I know.
And we've given Sony a hard time for... This is something else we were talking about earlier, John. We really did give Sony a hard time for E3 2006, which was...
6.
Yeah. And indeed 2005. Both of them weren't that
and 2005, yeah,
particularly great. Both of those were terrible E3 press conferences. It had a dramatic impact on PlayStation 3 as a platform, and this is worse.
This is much worse, because while those did not come to pass, especially the 2005 one, there was a vision related to games there that got people excited, and the reason they failed is that the excitement didn't really come to pass, or what they promised didn't come to pass, and so people were disappointed. But that doesn't mean that the vision was bad; it just didn't work out. This time, though, the vision is not good. Like, this focus on TV and all these like experiences outside of games, it doesn't work. Nobody's excited about this.
I guess at what point did people understand about the always on aspect of Xbox One, which was scrapped? Was that an E3 thing, or was this actually rumors
that was
leading up to
E3?
It was E3, okay.
Yeah, the online thing would happen. It was E3 where they really dropped the ball, actually.
Yeah.
Like, that's where those famous interviews with Don Matrick about, like, we have a product for these people, it's called Xbox 360. Like, all those quotes that would come to haunt them for years, it's all from E3.
Yeah.
So this was just, like, the beginning of that.
Well, in E3, we did have games, but we also had this concept of digital licenses attached to physical games. Which went down like a lead balloon. You had to kind of validate your used purchase at a game store or something and transfer the digital license. So the disc actually did nothing. This was a massive U-turn that Microsoft had to do, because Sony, the classic Yoshida thing where, how to share your used games. You just handed a disc over. That was hugely damaging. And then there was obviously, the specs disadvantage was something that Microsoft had to tackle, and they came up with the power of the cloud. Do you remember that? Where there would be...
Not here, though.
This was in E3, where they basically sat down. They had a kind of like a sit-down session where they talked about how they're going to tap into Azure for kind of offline or other remote calculations that would feed back into the game. That kind of happens... I mean, if you think about what a Fortnite or a Call of Duty Warzone server is doing, I guess that a lot of that stuff has come to pass on all platforms. But in terms of improving the teraflop count, that didn't really happen.
Yeah. No, it did not.
There was a lot of research into it too after the fact. I remember NVIDIA doing research about like injecting ray tracing into games via the cloud and things like that. It was definitely something people thought about, but it was just not realistic at all. The latency is so high.
I actually remember seeing a demo of Crackdown 3's like cloud stuff at Gamescom one year, where they actually had multiple units running and they were kind of showcasing the way it worked in like a real demo. And it was an interesting concept. It did seem to work, but I'd imagine there's just so many other issues, restraints, and other problems around it that just made it kind of impossible to execute the way that they wanted to. So
it could only ever work in multiplayer because, you know, otherwise, just think about potentially millions of people at launch day playing a single player campaign.
Exactly. It would be a mess.
Oh, dear.
I'm pleased to announce that we'll be launching Xbox One around the world later this year.
Wow.
That's very non-committal.
Wow.
Yeah, late. Not going to tell you when. Not going to tell you where. Just around.
Or how much.
They did actually, I mean, I guess in retrospect, we were just a couple of weeks away from E3. So we did learn this information in short order.
Yeah, that's true.
But in terms of primary messaging, in context at the time. What?
As we set our sights to the future, I'd like to leave you today by presenting a world.
They're doing a one more thing here.
Yeah, but it's not a good one.
No.
Just to be completely honest, it's not a good one.
Well, it's another multi-format game, isn't it? And to be fair, it was like one of the biggest. I mean, they've ticked off all of the major franchises here. You know, the sports games, FIFA is huge. And if you're going to go to another huge franchise, where else other than Call of Duty, which is what we're going to be seeing here.
Now, can you imagine, though, if at this time of the reveal, it would have been made clear that, it's going to be 720p on Xbox One and 1080p on PS4. Like, what that would do at this point in the cycle.
Yeah.
Wrecked them. Never recover.
I mean, that was when all that news started coming out about these early releases running at much lower resolutions on Xbox One. Everybody was like, wait, what? Like, really? Like that big of a difference?
It makes so much sense, though. Like, not the GPU
absolutely.
Isn't but if you have to deal with ESRAM and then slower, DDR3 for not your entire frame, like, you're going to see much lower res games, and it's only continued across the generation, if not gotten worse in some areas.
I think it got better. Like Xbox One generally targeted around 900p versus base PS4's 1080p, and it would usually be that kind of difference. It's just at launch, like the gulf was huge.
Yeah, so we had titles like Call of Duty 720p on Xbox and 1080p on PS4, and persisted to like Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, again, the same sort of differential. But generally speaking, 900p, 1080p was the difference. But obviously, there was the worst performance generally as well on top of the resolution.
Battlefield 4 was 720p and 900p on base PS4, but the PS4 ran it better than Xbox One as well. And when Xbox One launched, it had that awful scaling issue with that, like, basically added a sharpening filter to everything.
That's true. Yeah.
And also it was like crushing blacks. If you set it to if you set it to full range RGB, it was still crushing blacks and sort of like blowing out the whites. So you ended up with this like super overly contrasted image, and in lower res games it would be sharpened as well. So comparing like Ghosts or Battlefield 4 to the PS4 version, it looked much worse.
Gosh.
Yeah, so I mean, this is basically the only deep dive into a game we're getting, and it's Call of Duty Ghosts. And we do actually see some interesting tech here, but I don't think it was fully realized in Ghosts as such.
No. At this point in time, I think there's still a lot of research going on into the engine powering the game after this one, which would be Advanced Warfare. And that's where you see like the biggest generational difference, like a switch to like a more normalized physically based rendering model, really great post-processing, I would say just like it looks generationally different actually than Ghosts in a lot of ways.
Yes. And I mean, moving to PBR was the big thing at that point, and it was still very new. Obviously, developers on the cutting edge like Crytek and Guerrilla Games were already moving into that space. But, I can forgive them for being a little bit behind on that with Call of Duty and many other titles.
It's kind of interesting.
They've got a dog in a motion capture suit, guys.
I love that. The dog in the motion capture suit.
So they do talk about some stuff here that's interesting, I guess. They use tessellation on a lot of round-edged objects, like right there on the gun sights, which didn't see as much usage this generation for objects like that in games. It was more towards the later half of the gen that it was started to use for, like, I would say, ground textures, less so on discrete models that would move around the screen a lot. So it's like experimentation.
Yeah, I feel like triangle counts are high enough usually on these discrete models in its current form that you don't really need to go crazy with tessellation to make it look good within the context of the game.
Yeah, I think this is them where they have a game where a lot of it's already designed around last-gen consoles, so the way you tick up fidelity easily is by having an automated system to do it, which tessellation will do, That's what it's good for, I guess.
So they're calling it sub-D here. Is that just tessellation without a long word?
Yeah. It is a subdivision, like John said. I'm wondering, but I don't know actually how they did it in the final product. There are different ways to split up the model. Like the way Pixar does it is very different than every other, way GPUs usually do it. So maybe it does it in a special way. I have no idea.
I always laugh because fundamentally, the idea of subdividing these models up into smaller triangles, that was already done back on PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the common approach to get around the affine texture warping, is they would have to essentially increase the complexity of the mesh as it got closer to the camera.
It's interesting
they did it a lot.
These things about them talking about dynamic environments, and I just, of course, have to think back to Crysis, which had all these things years earlier.
Okay, Alex. We did it. We got Crysis in here.
Yeah. One thing I don't like about the way they're showing off these models is they're not showing them off in like direct lighting, but there's just like some sort of ambient light all around them. So it makes the models look very flat. They're obviously really good looking models, I would imagine. There's just no direct light on them.
Well, that's the same issue with the PS5 conference where they showed the guys talking with the black background, where when you have a mismatch betwing the lit person in front and then just like either a completely white or completely black background, it looks weird. Oh, there's the dog.
The moving mouth.
The mouth movement is... it's actually probably the most memorable part of this conference, beyond TVTV.
This is the best part of the conference by far right there. That was the best.
So they mentioned volumetric lighting at one point, but I'm pretty sure maybe in the underwater scene there is a volumetric light somewhere. But for the rest of the game, I cannot remember at all any real volumetric lighting.
I barely remember the game.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, do you?
I also don't really. I remember the swimming part. I remember the space part at the beginning.
I remember like a jungle area with like a tessellated ground or something, like around a creek.
That looks good.
There was like a sort of earthquake style event at the very beginning, if you recall, in the campaign.
Yeah, something like that.
And then you get warped into space.
That's what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I completely
But
blocked
that's
out.
literally the extent of my memories of Call of Duty Ghosts, apart from the fact that it was the first PlayStation 4 game that you could actually buy. It came out at the same time, I think, as the last gen versions, so you could go into a shop and buy Call of Duty Ghosts on PS4, but there was no PS4 to run it on. And funnily enough, of course, when you first booted Call of Duty Ghosts on PS4, it ran at 720p, and it got a patch to run at 1080p.
That's true. Also, Call of Duty Ghosts showed up on last gen machines, or I guess at the time current gen machines, because this game did appear on Wii U, and by this point Wii U was like, I guess it came out in the previous fall or winter, so it was still very, very new.
I'm remembering this dog. Didn't the PC version of the dog have Hairworks?
What?
Didn't it have Hairworks? Am I misremembering that? The PC version.
I mean, that sounds like something they might have had, but
something I remember something like that. It's like the only thing in the game that has it.
So I like this kind of stuff. I think this is cool. It's just that when there was literally nothing else, it doesn't work as well, right? Like, it's fun to see their models up close and see what they're trying to go for.
Well, look, the amount of focus this game is getting in terms of screen time is exactly what we want. We want the developer to be able to showcase their game and say, hey, this is what makes things different. Now, imagine if we had this, but before this, we had Turn 10 come out. This is what we're doing for Forza Motorsport 5.
Yeah.
That would have been amazing. Or, Crytek, Rise, Son of Rome, totally absent from this. It's not a great game, but it looks incredible. It looks next gen.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I feel like Rise actually would have been like, that could have been a Killzone Shadowfall moment for them. And that if they had shown, like, here's some gameplay from Rise, from Crytek, to showcase what the system can do, and you show one of the more impressive scenes in that game running, which they would do at E3, I think.
Yeah, they would.
But that would have been a great way to kick things off, because that game does look amazing.
I mean, it's all about making a statement for what the generation.
Is this actually gameplay footage now?
I think it's a lot of cinematic trailer footage. There's some of them are also fake, which is easy to recognize because they have motion blur in them, and the game doesn't have motion blur. It's like, okay.
We got that excellent motion blur in Advanced Warfare the next year, though.
Yeah.
Mainly in cutscenes, though, on the consoles.
Here's that creek, John.
Yep.
But the motion blur
so
was
there's
in the
sunlight
trailers.
coming from the left, by the way, and the sun's on the right-hand side. So, yeah, that's fake.
I love that.
It's so bad.
I mean, I love dogs. So,
yes.
I mean,
I know.
dogs in games, perfectly fine.
I
I remember you a gamer called the dog Colin. And I think Activision had to release a statement to say, look, his name isn't Colin.
Is it Rex? What is the name of the dog?
I'm going to call it Colin.
Liked about Call of Duty is that they do focus on real-time lighting in their games. Even, Call of Duty 4 or all of the, Black Ops 1 and 2 before this, I guess. Their engine targeting 60 FPS is a pretty awesome thing, and I think they deserve a lot of credit. Obviously, this game, you can say whatever you want about it, but it's targeting 60, and as a launch game, that's not easy,
Right, especially on the PS4 side, like doing a 1080p 60 shooter at launch like that. That's a pretty, that's a tall order.
The other thing, of course, is that Final Silicon was very, very, very late in getting to developers. So we get to E3 a couple of weeks later, and we're still seeing most of the titles there running on PC, not on Xbox or PlayStation 4 hardware.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just they weren't ready, and that's difficult.
I mean, thankfully, it's different this time around. Developers have had dev kits for PS5, especially, way ahead of time compared to last time.
That's good. That's important for sure.
So there we are.
That's basically it.
That's it.
That's how it
that's
ends.
The conference. That's how it ends.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, they ended the conference by showing a world in ruins, and that kind of represents perhaps the brand after this show. So, I mean, looking back at this, I actually think it was much worse than I had remembered and expected somehow. Like, I guess the hype of it being a new machine, even if it was disappointing, made it easier to gloss over it. But, like, from the modern lens, or through the modern lens, it's really, really, it's questionable, to say the least.
Yeah. The only level of interactivity that is shown at any one point is probably fake, and that's the interaction with the user interface through Kinect. And you don't actually see any gameplay, like of real gameplay at this thing.
I mean, and that's the key. They basically failed to excite people about a games machine by showing almost nothing games related.
Yeah, it's not.
It didn't work. It's not
really
good.
bad, actually. Yeah.
But I mean,
it gets worse. E3.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this is just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg for them. I mean, this is really interesting that this always seems to happen, where you have it happened with Sony going to PS3 after 2 successes. Xbox 360, they did well, and then they just really stumbled out of the gate on this. And I'd say Xbox One has never really caught up to PS4, but it's done well in the end. Mm-hmm. And the brand today is it's in a much better place than it was after this reveal. So, I mean, that's That's something for sure.
Lessons learned.
But
definitely.
I think that's lessons learned, exactly. But I think that's going to do it for this one. It's shorter than our previous ones, mercifully. Although we could have done with some more gameplay demos. But thanks for joining me, guys.
No problem.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
And if you guys enjoyed this video, this look back at disaster, be sure to let us know by liking, subscribing, ringing that notification bell for instant updates from Digital Foundry. And of course, come find us over on Twitter to discuss anything related to this and more. So until next time, this is John, Rich, and Alex all signing off.